Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our webinar today, Comprehensive Data Security for Amazon S3. We're very excited to be here, and we have a great set of content for you, along with a demo ready to go. But before we get started, just some housekeeping items. First of all, as normal, as usual, this webinar is being recorded, and also you will be receiving a link to the recording later in your email. We want the webinar to be interactive, so there's going to be some polls during the way. There's going to be an opportunity to ask questions. Actually, you can submit your questions at any time during using the questions panel on the you can bring up using the button in the bottom right corner of your screen, and we'll answer all the questions at the end of the webinar. There's also a chat button if you would like to chat with us at any point. With that, let's introduce our speakers today. We're very excited to have from AWS, Ashok Mahajan. Ashok, please introduce yourself.
Sure, Amaz. Hello, everyone. My name is Ashok Mahajan, and I'm a Senior Partner Solution Architect at Amazon Web Services. I'm part of the global startup team that focuses on startups. And in my role specifically, I work with security startups in their enablement journey on AWS that focus on co-build and go-to-market motions. Been in information security for close to 18 years now, with expertise in identity and access management, application security, data protection, and cloud migration across multiple domains.
That's excellent. Well, thanks for joining us, Ashok. Billy?
Hey, I'm Billy Van Cannon, Director of Product Management here at Baffle. I've been here about 2 years, and my background includes like 15 years of identity and access management and encryption. And I'm coming to you from Chicago and happy to talk about Amazon S3 data security.
Well, fantastic. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for joining us. We have a jam-packed agenda today, starting with Ashok, who's going to go over Amazon S3 and some of the security options that are provided, built into Amazon S3. And then Billy's going to take us through Baffle and what Baffle adds on top of it, and how it can help you protect your S3 data better. And then we'll have a demo, and we'll end with the Q&A. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Ashok. Ashok, all yours.
Thanks, Amaz. Well, before we talk about data protection, I think let's look at one key aspect that pretty much dictates and is basically the reason for the conversation whenever we talk about data, right? From the beginning of humanity to year 2003, we created only 1 zettabyte or half a zettabyte of data. However, in 2013, it took only 2 days to create that amount of data, and that pace has been growing exponentially. In 2018, global data was estimated to be 33 zettabytes. Industry analysis firm IDC expects that number to grow to nearly 175 zettabytes by 2025. To put that into perspective, 1 zettabyte is equivalent to a trillion gigabyte, and that's a lot of data. Now, we will be thinking, why is that important? This data growth presents a huge challenge to CIO, storage administrators, and companies of all sizes and all industry. Questions like how your business can handle this data growth, how can I secure this data, how can I ensure adherence to compliance and regulations, and whenever we are talking about compliance and regulation, they vary across different regions, and these are like common questions that always come up whenever you talk about data. So what customers really need is a simple, cost effective, and centralized way to process and protect their data at scale. This is why AWS provides a most complete set of comprehensive storage services for block, for object, and for file to meet your specific data needs. We have multiple services in that arena, but for today's conversation, we will be focusing on Amazon Simple Storage Service, or as commonly known as Amazon S3. I'm sure most of you on this call are aware of what Amazon S3 is all about, but someone who is not, a quick reference of what Amazon S3 is. It is basically an object storage service that offers industry-leading scalability, data availability, security, and performance. It allows you to store and protect any amount of data for a range of use cases like data lakes, website, cloud-native applications, backup, archive, machine learning, analytics, and more. By consolidating all of that data in one place, it makes an AWS data lake an excellent foundation for artificial intelligence and machine learning data used in high performance computing or even large scale big data analytics. With Amazon S3, you can store data across a wide range of different storage classes, purpose-built for your specific use case and access pattern. For scenarios where your data is changing, your patterns are unknown, or very unpredictable access mechanism is there, you use S3 intelligent tiering, which automatically moves data to the most cost-effective access tier based on your access frequency without impacting performance, retrieval free, or operational overhead. For a more predictable access pattern, you can store mission critical production data in S3 standard for frequent access. You can accelerate performance critical applications by storing your most frequent access data in S3 Express 1 zone, which improves your data access speed by 10x and reduce your request cost by 50% compared to a standard S3. If you have data residency requirement that can't be met by existing AWS region, you can even use S3 Outpost storage class to store your S3 data on premises using S3 on Outpost. When we think about data storage, one thing that's always common is we always are worried about data security. So now let's talk about some of these security mechanisms that are available with Amazon S3, and I'll go over some of these aspects in brief. Cloud security at AWS is our highest priority. And then when it comes to security, we follow a shared responsibility model where AWS is responsible for security of the cloud. That means AWS is responsible for security of the physical infrastructure, the facilities, the compute, basically the building block that runs your AWS services. You as a customer are responsible for security in the cloud. What that means is you basically secure your workload and your application that you deploy onto cloud and have the flexibility to put more emphasis on security of sensitive data and adjust as needed based on your specific requirement. You basically own and are responsible for managing your own data, including encryption options, classifying your assets, and using the right IAM tools to apply the right permissions. And when it comes to S3, AWS provides you with tools and features and guidance using the best practices to securely store your data, share, and even audit the access that someone uses for accessing your objects in Amazon S3. You secure your data both in transit and at rest with encryption, and you grant access based on best practices and identity and access management policies, or even using the bucket policies. And towards the end, you audit all your access to ensure you are periodically reviewing the access. Let's dive into some of these features and talk more about that. When many of us think about encryption, things that come to our mind are compliance, best practices, security, how do I protect my data, how do I protect my customer data. But I think in reality, what everyone really means is how do I have control of the keys that are needed for decryption and to prevent unauthorized physical access to that plain text data. Amazon S3 provides you with encryption options both for data at rest and in transit. When we talk about encrypting your data at rest, the difference between these options is basically how you manage your master key. For example, in server-side encryption, AWS handles the key rotation and is very popular. And in fact, it's the default encryption configuration for every bucket in S3. Now, if you have corporate standards around how you want to do key rotation, how do you want to manage your keys, you can use AWS Key Management Service. When you want to store your own encryption key, you can use server-side encryption with customer-provided keys as well. You can use client-side encryption where you want to encrypt your data before you even upload to S3. The second aspect, which is critical from data protection perspective, is basically how do you provide access? Like we talked a bit about a bit ago, that you can use either IAM policies or you can even use bucket policies. You use IAM policy when you prefer your access control policies closer to the user. Things like what can this user do in AWS? Which specific S3 action this user can perform or this role can perform. Whereas on the other side, when you use bucket policy, you prefer to have access control closer to your S3 environment. Like who can access this S3 bucket? Which role or which user can access this bucket policy? Another useful tool that you can help manage access in S3 are access points. When you have a S3 bucket and have different user groups that you want to grant different level of access, instead of maintaining one big bucket policy, you can actually use access points. You can think of access point as dividing your bucket into multiple namespaces, and these are especially useful to simplify access for shared or multi-tenant buckets. We see this a lot in data lake scenarios where users need access to some of their data and others need access to different part of data within the same bucket. For data protection also, we have multiple options. You can use Amazon S3 object locks to store immutable objects using write once, read many model. It can help you prevent objects from being deleted or overwritten for a fixed period of time or even indefinitely as well. You can use S3 object like to meet your regulatory requirements in finance or healthcare sector, where you require warm storage or even add an extra layer of protection against object changes or accidental deletions. You can use S3 versioning to preserve, retrieve, and store every version of object that you store in the object in the bucket. Versioning in Amazon S3 is a means of keeping multiple variants of objects in the same bucket so that you can recover more easily from both unintended user action or even application failures. S3 replication is an automated mechanism, an asynchronous process that makes identical copy of your data, retaining the metadata, including the creation timestamp and date, and even the version ID. You can replicate objects to single destination bucket or even multiple destination buckets, that too within the same region or even different region. We talked about data protection, we talked about IAM policies, but it is not enough just to set the security setting once. You need to verify that these settings are actually working as required. And that's where monitoring becomes an important part of maintaining the reliability, availability, and performance of Amazon S3 and your AWS solution in general. AWS Trusted Advisor is an online tool that provides you with the real-time guidance to help you provision your resources following the best practices. In relation to Amazon S3, Trusted Advisor checks login configuration of your bucket, performs security check that might have open permissions, and even fault-tolerant checks for bucket that do not have versioning enabled or even versioning suspended. AWS Configs lets you assess, audit, and evaluate the configuration of your resources against a desired configuration. To help you manage the security posture of your organization, S3 data, Macie provides you with the inventory of your S3 bucket and automatically evaluates and monitors the bucket for security and access control. Macie automates discovery and reporting of your sensitive data and generates the finding for you to review and remediate as necessary. You can record the actions that are taken by users, role, or even AWS services on S3 resources and maintain log records of auditing for compliance purposes as well. To do this, you can use Amazon S3 server access logs or even CloudTrail logs or combination of both. Another important feature that AWS provides is Amazon S3 Storage Lens that delivers organization-wide visibility into object storage usage, activity trends, and make actionable recommendations to optimize cost and apply data protection best practices. And that's not it. When it comes to security, along with these native AWS services and features, we have a strong network of AWS partners with deep expertise and specialized solution to meet your specific needs. By leveraging AWS services along with partner solutions like Baffle's data security for Amazon S3, you extend the capability of your AWS solution and utilize the latest technology that meets your specific organization needs and even your compliance needs. Now let's hear from Billy how Baffle secure your data in S3 by encrypting the data before it goes into the bucket and provide protection both at the field and object level. Over to you, Billy.
All right. Thank you, Ashok. I wanted to start out my time here with a poll. I'm just curious what people are using Amazon S3 buckets for. So the categories I came up with are backup and like disaster recovery, content distribution, whether it's static websites directly or peer-to-peer sharing, sharing data with partners. Number 4 here is data lake in the classic sense, at least in my mind, of like your whole pipeline with analytics being the main goal, or data mining. And then last I have on here is Gen AI. All right. Looking at the poll here, it's we got looks like Gen AI is coming in here at just got some different results. It's very evenly matched between backup, sharing, data lake, and Gen AI. They all come in at about like 21%, and then content distribution. So it's pretty clear that S3 buckets are fantastic tools and used in a lot of different places. All right. So let's talk about Baffle and what we add. So the first thing, of course, is what's the issue? Let's see here, let me catch up here a little bit. A lot of the data leaks come just from misconfigurations, and it can be anything from leaving your S3 bucket public to old forgotten accounts with access. You could be sharing with business partners, and then it turns out they're negligence. The CSO article in the top right is about that. And S3 buckets are so easy to use and so flexible that people often overuse them. So we have an example here in the top left where somebody downloaded all their passwords out of a password manager and then put them in an S3, which completely defeats the purpose of a password manager, but for whatever reason, they wanted easier access to their passwords, or they wanted to share them, or whatever the case may be. Even CSPMs, or cloud security posture management vendors, have been caught off guard and had leaks. And a lot of times they're implemented after the fact. There's a breach, and then people say, oh, well, it was because it was misconfigured. Let's implement CSPM. Baffle thinks that encryption is the solution because that's the only access control that follows the data wherever it goes. However, we have to consider how encryption is implemented, because that's critical. So let's look at that. So as Ashok mentioned, server-side encryption. And if we break this down into, I have here in this picture, the bucket is the actual S3 program running in memory. And when it does server-side encryption, it encrypts and decrypts on the way to saving it to the hard drive. So this is fantastic for protecting against direct hard drive attacks, say your hard drive is physically stolen, but it's still transparent. So it doesn't protect against, all the misconfigurations that are possible, or negligence with like past accounts or anything. Like in that sense. So those in that first slide where I had those attack vectors, it doesn't protect against those. Another one on here is from the cloud infrastructure admin. Now, this is something I never worry about because I know AWS has safeguards a million miles long. But a lot of times when people are trying to move to the cloud, their legal department or their compliance department say, well, in theory, somebody at AWS could get a hold of this. And that's why you can't move to the cloud. And so Baffle actually has a lot of our business because we can come in and say, we can put safeguards in to make sure even a cloud infrastructure admin can't get access. So he also mentioned client-side encryption, and AWS offers an SDK. But there's still some issues with that. The first thing is, maybe you're coming from a lot of different sources. And how do you do that protocol transfer into the S3 API? And then the other things is, how do you do key management? How do you do encryption policy management? And how do you do auditing? And how do you centralize those things? Because a key tenet of security is having all the protections and auditing and accounting in a centralized location. So if we kind of look at a comparison here, the first one I have is client-side encryption. And across the top, I have the different aspects. And the first one is code changes. If you're going to do client-side, you either have to add Amazon's SDK or do it yourself. And then for all these other things, you have to add additional code on top of that. So the centralized policies, where you can implement your own version of key management and auditing if you add more code. If you want to protect against the S3 misconfiguration or credential loss, then you can do that with Amazon's SDK. Protect against cloud administrator access, you could also do that with Amazon's SDK. If you want to do field level encryption, which I'll talk about more, of course you can do that if you implement it yourself, which is more code on top of that. And if you want to provide geographic data isolation, you can of course do that by implementing more code. If we look at server-side encryption, it's great because you need no code changes, and you can centralize it if you have somebody in charge of all your S3 bucket security. But then it doesn't protect against the other attack vectors that we talked about. And with Baffle, you can protect against all of those. And here's how we do it. Oops, I think we got the slides mixed up, so I'll go back here. So Baffle works as a reverse proxy that goes in between your applications and your Amazon S3 bucket. It can work to transfer the protocols, and it can do encryption along the way. Not only can it do full file encryption, where'd it go? I think, yeah, sorry about that. I think we got a slide messed up. But not only can it do full file encryption, but it can do field encryption. So let me see here if I find that slide. Okay, I must have blanked it out. And what I mean by field encryption is, like, let's say you have a text file, you can select a certain position. So like if you have a web form and you always know where certain sensitive information is, you can encrypt just that area. Or you can do it by regex, so you can select it if you have some kind of pattern that you can pick out. If you have a CSV file, then you can do it by column number or column header. If you have a JSON or XML file, then you can do key value pairs and encrypt that way. And we can also do Parquet columns. So that's what I mean by field level encryption. All right, so in this example, we're using Baffle to upload from our existing infrastructure, using both SFTP and HTTPS connections into an S3 bucket. And in this example, we're doing it for backup reasons. So region 1 is our primary, and then region 2 would be for disaster recovery, say. And then we're also making another copy for sharing with our business partners. So not only can we determine what's encrypted in the first place, but we can also have another shield up there to determine even more fine-grained access for any of our business partners. And when we talk about attack vectors, now let's say your business partner is neglectful and they leave the bucket open. It's still protected because the data itself is encrypted. So an attacker can't get it that way. And then also, you notice, even a cloud infrastructure admin can't get access because that data has been encrypted. In this picture, I'm showing Baffle kind of in the air, but the great thing about it is it's not a SaaS. It's a container. It's a Docker container. And therefore, you can choose whether you want to deploy it along with AWS and all your other cloud deployments, or you can keep it on-prem. And I also have it hooked to the AWS KMS because they have a great service there. But say you don't want the Amazon to have the keys either. You can decide to put Baffle, like deploy it as individual servers on premises and hook to something else like HashiCorp Vault or HMS for your key management. All right, so let's go into this first use case, Baffle. Well, I guess I talked about a couple of use cases already, but for the next one, data pipelines and Gen AI. Oh, here's the slide I was looking for. All right, so let's say I talked about field level encryption, and let's say that you want to create a support chatbot, and to train it, you want to use all your tickets, right? All your support tickets that you have. And so you have an issue here. The computer screen gets the the blue screen of death because Microsoft implemented a fix on their side, and now you have to have an upgrade. And so the tickets come in, and you want to train the chatbot on these things, but there's sensitive information in there. Well, you could encrypt the entire file, but then of course that won't make any sense to the chatbot. You won't. It's senseless to train it on encrypted data. So what you can do with Baffle before you upload to your S3 is go in and just encrypt, just like in this case, the name, social security number, and address. And then that way the chatbot can still pick up on the information, the date, the issue, the resolution, and those kind of things. And here's a graphical example of that. So say your ticketing application, say it could be something like maybe ServiceNow or something, and you can pour that information into your S3 bucket using Baffle and just encrypt the sensitive information. In this example, we have an LLM, which is, has been trained on a lot of public data, but we want to incorporate our own private data through this RAG. So we take that data that we put in the S3 bucket and it's encrypted, put it in the RAG, and now when somebody asks a question, say, hey, I got the blue screen of death, it can come back and say, well, you need to upgrade. And if the user somehow tricks the machine into saying, hey, give me the name of people who had this issue, it'll just come back with the encrypted name. Another thing you can do is add another Baffle proxy on the other side, so that if you have authorized users who do need to have that information for some reason, then you can go ahead and decrypt it on that end. Amazon S3 buckets are the foundation for all of their, not all of their services, but so many of their services that it's really a great focal point to protect your data and then distribute everything there throughout the entire pipeline and only decrypt it at the end. So a good example here is with Amazon Redshift. So here I'm bringing in multiple sources of data, encrypting only the information I need to into an S3 bucket, and then I'm doing analysis on Amazon Redshift. And of course, you could have users who are getting the information like averages, min-max, whatever analytics they need, and you can block the PII. But you can also set up a policy, connect a Lambda service to it, and that Lambda service will, depending on who is connected, reach out to Baffle and decrypt that information as required. So now your entire pipeline from end to end, there could be a lot of different stages in between there. So there could be ETL, there could be streaming, there could be all kinds of different processes from the ingestion to the consumption, but it would be protected from end to end. And just as a side note, Baffle also has a database proxy. So for structured data, say you have Postgres or MySQL data that you want to also add to your S3 bucket, you can encrypt in the same manner and use that information in your analysis. Okay, and then the different use case here is Baffle for multi-tenant, or if you have a SaaS application, this would be ideal. So let's say you have a multi-tenant application and you have a Baffle proxy deployed in front of your S3 bucket, and you have many different tenants, and your tenants insist that their data be kept separate. So what you can do is within Baffle, assign different keys for every different user. And that way, every person can bring their own key, or actually in this case, hold their own key. And all they have to do is provide access to the key that they want to use to encrypt in your S3 bucket. So this way you can use one S3 bucket instead of having to provide a different S3 bucket for every different customer, which could be hundreds, could be millions, depending on how many customers you have. And not only that, don't forget your backup and recovery, which can multiply that by a factor of 2 or 3. Now you have one S3 system that can scale up and use encryption for logical partitioning. You can take it a step further. Oh, I should say also, sometimes the best way to get a customer in the first place is to make it easy for them to leave. So let's say tenant 2 wants to leave here. All they have to do is revoke access to their key, and that data is effectively shredded. So they don't have to come back and audit you and try to make sure that you've got rid of their data. If they take access to that key, then they can be assured that the data is safe. You can also use this setup for geographical isolation. So in that top box, we have a multi-tenant application in the US with its tenants connected. And then we have a copy of that application in the European Union with its own Baffle data proxy. And we're using the same S3 system for both of them. Now, if somebody comes along in the US, say the government comes along and says, hey, we got a subpoena here, we want all the information you have, there's no way that they can get the data from the European Union because that Baffle proxy only has connections to the tenants in the USA. So this is great for data sovereignty needs. This is great for GDPR requirements and all their equivalents in like Latin America and China. You can isolate based on geography, and you're free to have your S3 bucket scale and set up any kind of system you want. You could have, your primary could be in the US and your backup could be in the EU. They could both be primaries and then back each other up. You're free to set that up however you want to. All right, so you can use the Baffle S3 data proxy to protect your S3 data from misconfiguration or unauthorized access. You can ensure even the cloud infrastructure administrators can't get access. You can transfer data from the sources, any sources, using multiple protocols. You can encrypt elements within files. You can provide end-to-end encryption of an entire data pipeline and GenAI. You can logically isolate tenant data within an S3 bucket, and you can geographically isolate data within an S3 bucket. So now I'll go ahead and step into a demo. Share screen. All right, so we'll go ahead and put that off there. Okay, so just want to bring up one slide here. All right. So this is my setup. On my PC at home, I have a Linux terminal up, and that'll be this over here. I have a Baffle data proxy. It happens to be in AWS, but like I said, it's a container. You can deploy it anywhere. And it's connected in turn to an S3 bucket. And I have this CSV file, which I'll pull up here. It's called customers. And what I wanted to do is protect the SSN column. So I'll go over to my terminal and I'll go ahead and issue an HTTPS command. And so I'm doing an upload file of this customer CSV. And then this is my data proxy IP address. And this is my endpoint here. And then I'm going to save it as a customer CSV file. All right. And while that's going, I'll go over to my my S3 bucket, and I'll update it here. And then the customer's CSV shows up. When I go ahead and open it, you can see here, I'll make this a little bit bigger, that the social security numbers have been format preserved being encrypted. So in this case, all the digits have been replaced with either uppercase, lowercase, or lowercase, uppercase, or digits. But it's still in the same format, so 3 digits and then 2 and then 4. But you can also do a digit-to-digit transformation. I just wanted to make it obvious by using the numbers that these were different, that they were encrypted. And then I can go ahead and go back and do the opposite and pull that down. So in this command, again, I'm hitting the data proxy and that endpoint. And then I'm pulling the file down, but I'm giving it a different name because I already have one with that name on here. So I'll go in here and it shows up. And so when I brought it back, oops, it was decrypted. Yeah, DEC decrypted. All right. So in this example, my PC is just simulating whatever application you're building and reaching out to Baffle, we're doing the protocol conversion and then storing it in an S3 bucket. Now, if I go back, let's see here, to this picture, you can do the same thing, but now instead in Baffle, you can set it up so that it can accept a JOT token, a JSON Web Token. And in that token, you can have claims, you can set up your user, you can set up multiple other claims that we can verify against, but that will also map to the key. So you send in your payload and your JOT token, we'll encrypt it with the proper key, and then it'll be locked away. And then when you want to do the opposite and decrypt, you'll send that same JOT token to ensure that that's who you are and pull it back. All right. And that is the demo. All right, over to you, Hamaz.
All right, well, thank you, Billy and Ashok. Guys, as a reminder, you can submit your question using the questions panel in the bottom right-hand side. So let's do some questions now. While we get wait for some of the questions to come in, I also want you guys to know there's more resources available on our website. You can scan this QR code to get to our page. You can also schedule a call with one of our product people to get any of your questions answered about the Baffle product. So having said that, let's get into one of our first questions coming in. Ashok, I think this one's for you. What capabilities does Amazon S3 provide to protect my data against accidental or malicious deletes?
Thanks, Thomas. I think we touched upon some of these aspects while I was talking about the different features that Amazon S3 offers. The object versioning, S3 replication, object log. These are the optional features that you can actually use to add that extra layer of protection beyond the durability that Amazon S3 automatically provides. In addition, I think you're following the best practices where you periodically back up your data as part of your organization data strategy are some of the good features to have and capabilities to have when you think about protecting your data from accidental delete. Another key aspect that adds additional layer of security is using Versionee's multi-factor authentication delete capability. So by default, all your requests to Amazon S3 requires you to use your AWS credentials. But if you enable versioning with MFA delete, that gives you basically a second form of authentication that is required before you can permanently delete an object. So all of these combined or individually as well can meet your specific needs, what you're looking for.
Got it. Wonderful. Thank you. Billy, a question for you. Would any of the data that's being encrypted pass through Baffle's own servers, meaning would Baffle be able to see any of the data, or is it all via our own servers and infrastructure?
Right. That's a common question. People are basically want to know if it's a SaaS, or even the fact that we deliver software. It's not a SaaS. The fact that we deliver software, do we have any telemetry? And the answer is no. It's a standalone Docker container that you can deploy. You can put them on standalone servers, or you can put it within a Kubernetes cluster and have it scale that way. But it's completely independent software that we're selling.
Okay, great. Another question, Ashok, I think maybe for you. How can I ensure all objects in my bucket are encrypted? Can I use my own encryption keys with S3?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think, like I said, Amazon S3 bucket already provides a default encryption option, but you can use a bucket policy to ensure that all the objects that are being uploaded are encrypted. And as you upload, you also want to verify the data as well. So to verify that encryption status for all your S3 objects, you can use S3 inventory report. In terms of using your own keys, yes, you can use your own keys. The kind of options Billy and I talked about in terms of the server-side encryption with customer-provided key. Or another option is you can use the client-side encryption where you encrypt your data before you upload to S3. So in both these options, you have flexibility of providing your own keys, which will not be the default keys that Amazon uses out of the box.
Right. I want to add to that as well. I mean, if you're using Baffle to do your encryption, you can still turn on SSE. You know, you can use any combination of your own keys. You could use one key for Baffle and a different key for SSE if you wanted to. You know, it'd be double encrypted on your hard drive, but you know, more safety.
Good. Okay. All right. Billy, and next question here is for you. Will Baffle integrate with our existing identity access management system and role-based controls we've set up? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mentioned one of the ways we keep the keys mapped to the object is through JOT tokens. So if you're using our API or the HTTP method, you can attach a JOT token, and that JOT token can be issued by your identity provider. And then within Baffle, you can either have a public key saved in it, or you can have a link to your identity provider that will do the JOT verification itself.
Okay, excellent. Okay, well, looks like that is all the questions we have, and I would like to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you also to Ashok for joining us from AWS, and Billy for sharing the demo and his insights. As a reminder, we're going to have the on-demand version of this webinar available right away, and you're going to be getting a replay link via your email. Please feel free to share this webinar with your colleagues and peers as well. And we hope to see everybody on our next webinar. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.